How do you personally, do you meditate? What do you do to remain so positive?
I like wine. Hi, I'm Luke Mangan, chef restaurateur, sitting in Sydney, Australia, talking to Renee on her amazing new podcast. It's amazing.
But how did you end up with Virgin? Because obviously I've seen a lot of photos of you with Richard Branson.
Yeah, well, I mean, when I had my first restaurant, Salt, in Sydney, and we opened that in February 1999, just before Sydney Olympics 2000, 4 guys came in for dinner, flown in from the UK, and they sat near the kitchen, and we had an open kitchen there, and one of them asked to see me after their meal, and I thought, it's one of two things here. It's either a fantastic meal or it's a bloody bad meal. But thankfully, it was a fantastic meal, and we got talking, and they said their boss was out in the next month, and they wanted some experiences for him while he was out, etc., etc. And I asked where they worked, and they said for Virgin, and then put 2 and 2 together. Their boss was Richard Branson, so I gave them my mobile and said if he wants to call me, and if he needs a table or whatever, we'll do our best to look after him. About a month later, I did get a call on Friday at 11 a.m. And at the end of the phone, it was, is that Luke? I said, yes. And he goes, oh, it's Richard Branson. And, you could well imagine I'm thinking this is the staff taking, having a laugh. Yeah. And I looked around, but it wasn't. And then he asked if he could come in for lunch into our Salt restaurant. And at that particular day, we had quite a big event on, and we were full. So I diverted him to our Bondi restaurant called Moorish, and booked him. He said he needed a table for 10, and I thought, great, on a Friday lunch. So we arranged a nice table on the balcony, and just about to hang up, and he asked me if I'd be down there to join him. And our Friday lunch in both our restaurants were pretty full, and I was cooking at Salt at those days. So I quickly rushed down and met them, and he was with his wife Joan and Holly and Sam and a few others. And we had some champagne on the balcony, and that was all good. And I left them to lunch, and I went back and cooked at Salt. And about that night at about 7 p.m, I get another call, and Luke, it's Richard. And I thought, oh my God, he's had food poisoning or something. He wasn't happy, but he said, look, lunch was fantastic. We'd love to dine at Salt. And I said, yeah, no problems. When do you want to do that? And he goes, tonight. And I go, wow, Friday night again, we're chock-a-block. And anyway, you find a table. We made a table available. He walks in about 20 minutes later, and the whole restaurant stops and blah, blah, blah. And he asked me to cooked for him again, and then asked me for a drink afterwards, and just got talking about how he was launching Virgin Atlantic into Australia from London. And then he had plans for other things, possibly in the future. But he asked if I would be interested in cooking the food from Sydney to London, London to Sydney on Virgin Atlantic in upper class, they used to call it. Yeah. Of course, it was upper class. And so I kind of said, yeah, great. And he said, someone will be in touch. And someone was in touch, and about a month later, and said, oh, Luke, Richard would like to fly you to Necker Island to meet and chat about things, about the airline. And I thought, yeah, it's got to be a joke. Anyway, a month later, we flew to Necker. He flew myself and 3 other chefs of mine, and he wanted us to cook some dinners and things like that on the island for 2 weeks. But when I got there about midnight, because of the bit long journey, there was a note on the bed. Luke, I'd love you to join Joan and I for breakfast. So I met them for breakfast, and we had a great chat. And he basically said, listen, I don't want you to cook anything. I just want you and your team to enjoy the island. And, and we'll talk in the next we'll talk over the next 2 weeks on things. And really, I learned how to play tennis. I learned how to kite surf and wakeboarding. So that's all I did for 2 weeks, basically. And we cooked one meal, and that was it. And the rest is history. We started Virgin Atlantic, then moved on to Virgin Australia, etc. So we were lucky.
Wow, you're so lucky and such a generous man. And what do you think his objective was? Just to really get to know you, to really get you in his fold?
Yeah, very much. Again, just last year, December 19, because last year didn't really happen, did it? December 19, he invited me over to cook at the Necker Cup, which he does every year. Antarctica trip was my last big trip, but just before that, I was on Necker Island in December, cooking on for the Necker Cup. He does the tennis cup tournament, which was pretty incredible. So I think we cooked for about 300 billionaires on that island that night.
And did you get any really strange requests from billionaires?
No, they're all cool. You know, I ended up staying in Richard's house on the new island, Mosquito Island, and that was pretty incredible because that part of the island had just been finished, which is across the way from Necker Island. It's about 10 minutes in a speedboat. So yeah, it's pretty cool. So that was a good trip. So my last international journeys was Necker Island, New York, and Antarctica.
Well, that's a good way to, press pause after all of that, I would have thought, if you have to.
Yeah.
And tell me, you've cooked for a lot of other celebrities. I mean, Princess Mary and her husband come to mind. So does Tom Cruise. How have you made those celebrity connections? Is that through Richard Branson?
No, I think where it all happened was Salt in Darlinghurst when we opened that restaurant in 2000 or 1999. That was, we were the hot, we were very lucky to be the hottest new thing. In dining in those times in Australia, you had Tetsuyas, you had Rockpool, Pier, and a few other big name restaurants. But Salt was sort of in a new boutique hotel called the Kimpton.
I remember.
Had amazing. I think that's where we first met.
It is where we first met. Yeah. I wrote a review of it, I believe.
Yeah. And we used to just get everyone. We had so much attention. When the Sydney Olympics were on, I got the opportunity to cook on the US Today show live out at Olympic Park with Matt Lauer and Katie Couric, who were the hosts of the Today show. Yeah. Back then, and I had to go out there at midnight, so it was live back in the US for breakfast TV. So we got pretty lucky with all that, with that audience and all those sorts of people starting to come, and then Baz Luhrmann lived out the back of Salt, the famous director, and Baz became a friend of ours and a regular at the restaurant. And Baz would bring in all sorts of people. He was entertaining, and Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman used to come, and Nicole had a birthday there. Tom had a birthday there, and it was pretty incredible. So it was a hot spot. And I remember one night Baz brought in Elton John for dinner, of all people. So that was pretty incredible. Yeah.
And the celebs, in those days, were they very demanding? Did you get some difficult moments with some of them?
No, not at all. They were all just, look, in fact, I was just before we got online, I just got an email for someone quite flying in to Sydney next week to cook for, which we've got to look at. So, look, there was a little list of can't haves and wants this and that, but that's normal, probably. Yeah. People coming to restaurants and gluten-free and intolerant, etc. So I think it's a normal part, but no, they're no more demanding than anyone else.
And look, you must have been missing travel a lot. I mean, I was reading that at one stage you had a business empire across 5 countries. I think you had restaurants in Indonesia, Japan, the Maldives, Singapore, and Australia. How have you coped without that international sphere over the last couple of years?
I guess you just adapt, don't you? And I was probably half the year on a plane in different countries and hotels and things like that. But, I was lucky enough to go on a cruise and landed back into Sydney, Australia on the 2nd of March, 2020. And it was a bucket list cruise where I went to the Antarctic and did that cruise. And it was a bucket list, and it was sort of on that cruise, there was all this talk of, what might be coming ahead, this pandemic. And if you've got a bucket list, make sure you tick things off on it. That's all I'll say.
That's what we've all learned, isn't it? How was the Antarctic? Was it amazing?
It was incredible. A friend of mine runs and owns Scenic Cruises, and he has a new ship that he'd launched a couple of years, and I had the privilege of checking it out, and Antarctica was just incredible. You just just one of those experiences. If it was always on that list, and really, I don't know what made me push to go do it then and there, but it was just the perfect timing.
Absolutely. But of course, you're very familiar with ships because you were the chef and ambassador on P&O Cruises for some time.
Yeah, well, I've been in partnership with them for about 10 years, P&O, and we had 5 ships and over 6 restaurants and bars on their ships, and we're waiting to launch 2 more ships when the government says we can launch 2 ships, but the plan is to launch their new ships perhaps earlier in the new year, Adventure, and have our Luke's Bar and Grill on a couple of them and our Salt Grills on the others. So we're looking forward to that.
And you were also been on rail with Belmont's Eastern Express rail journey, which was very upmarket, and also Virgin. So talk us through the different, ways to travel and how you feed people on these different modes of transport.
Well, Eastern Oriental Express was a great partnership, and we had our Luke's Kitchen on there for some time. And I don't know if you've ever traveled on a luxury train like that, but it was a fantastic experience. And the one thing I loved about that train was that the last carriage was the bar carriage, and it was actually open air. So you would be, going 100k an hour, and you'd be going through rice paddies at night, and you'd be sipping on a gin and tonic or whatever it may be. But it was pure luxury and a fantastic experience, and no different from cooking on an aeroplane or a cruise ship or in a restaurant. We try to put all our food styles into one where it can be transported, I guess is the word. So eating on a train or eating in business class on an aeroplane or in our restaurant, I like to think it's the same. In fact, we do food for the Mater Hospital here in Queensland, Australia. That food is some of the food you get there in a hospital, is some food you get in our restaurants. Probably less a little sugar and salt, but apart from that, it's we've worked with the dietitians there to make hospital food or change hospital food for the better. We've started in Brisbane, and we hope others will follow in Australia.
Oh, look, I think that's just such a great initiative at the hospital. I have to say, I sat on a board for some time, and our objective was to reduce the consumption of sugar in Australia by 50%. And the hospitals came up as some of the worst in terms of their nutritional value. And I've seen the photos of the food that you have been making. And I mean, it almost makes you want to go to hospital. It's just wonderful, Luke. It's really, really good.
Yeah, thank you.
But getting to the Belmont train, I've actually been on one of those trains. I went from up to Machu Picchu on the Belmont train, exactly as you described, with the open air carriage at the back. And to be honest, the culinary experience was just first class. Yeah,
well, it certainly is. They do a good job all round. And that trip you were just talking about is on my bucket list, which I will get to eventually.
That's again, absolutely. And Cusco, where you leave from, is actually so magnificent. Don't add a few more days onto your itinerary, because the organic and plant-based food in that particular location and the spiritual quality is just, South America is pretty special to me. I really enjoy traveling there. It's great.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And I mean, in all of your success, and it's certainly a very global story, is there a moment when things changed? I mean, was it when you met Richard Branson, for example? Can you name it? I mean, it's just, you've had such phenomenal success. I would say you're the most famous Australian chef in the world.
Look, I think when I was at a restaurant called CBD, which was under John Hems, which is the father of, who's now passed away, Justin Hems, he gave me that start in Sydney at Hotel CBD. And then from there it went to Salt. And I think really Salt was the key to it, because we had all those people coming in, and that's where the brand started to work. I got into TV over here, cooking segment on Channel 9. So just things evolved from that, and then I expanded and then went to Asia and cookbooks, and it just all sort of flowed along. I wouldn't say one particular thing did it, but it was many ingredients to that certain recipe made it successful.
Absolutely. And what do you see as the future of dining? I mean, particularly globally, but here in Australia, things have just opened up.
Yeah, look, I think, we've been in 100 and odd days of lockdown here in Sydney, which hasn't been easy for anyone. And a lot of small businesses, not just hospitality and tourism, but other small businesses, retail, etc., will suffer and have suffered and have struggled to pay their rent and pay bills from, well before we were locked down in June. But I think what we're seeing is people are coming back and, with a vengeance, and dining out in restaurants and things. We physically we opened our bars last week in Sydney Hilton and in Glass, and we launched a new wine bar on the street, which, dealing with council and red tape, would normally take probably 4 to 5 months to get it approved. Now, government here have been fantastic in trying to get the city open. It took us 2 weeks to get it approved. 20-seat wine bar out in the middle of George Street in the Sydney CBD, which is great. To answer your question, I think we launched with a black tie dinner this Wednesday, and that sold out in 20 minutes. 180 seats sold out in 20 minutes. I decided in the middle of lockdown that we've got to do something special, because people are going to want to itch to get out and get their suits on and ladies dressed up and hair and makeup and all that. So I decided with that black tie, and I thought, okay, we just sell that. But that sold out in 20 minutes. So I put another one on for sale the next night, and that sold out. And I put another one on, and that sold out. So we sold 4 out in a row, and we're actually fully booked in the restaurant till the end of the month. So we're pretty lucky, and I think that says it all for where Sydney's at. And I think, you know, when Melbourne reopens, that'll be people, and now borders are eventually opening, and all these amazing tourists we're speaking to on your podcast will hopefully be coming to Australia soon without quarantine.
100%. Well, it sounds like it is going to be soon, thankfully. Now, don't you have another restaurant you've been looking at? Is it Luke's Kitchen, or there's something happening in a hotel lobby, I read?
Yeah, we had a Luke's Kitchen in Waterloo in a big warehouse space, which we'd had for 12 odd years, and we had done a deal with a new hotel, the Kimpton, which is an American brand, and which is opening in January 2022. And our Luke's Kitchen will be part of that in the lobby and the bar area. We have an amazing rooftop bar on the 7th floor, and the Kimpton Hotel, which I've stayed in many through the US, is a beautiful boutique brand. We have 180 odd rooms, and it's a very old Art Deco 1930s building, and it's a stunning building, and the design we've done is pretty schmick. So we're quite excited by that.
Wow. I have to ask you, you know, you are so positive, Luke. We are probably at the most difficult point that we've been probably in both of our lifetimes in hospitality and even in travel. How do you personally, do you meditate? What do you do to remain so positive?
I like wine. Look, I think, you know, I don't know, I'm just blessed with, you know, the glass is always half full. If a problem arises, let's not dwell on it. How do we fix it, make it better, and let's not let it happen again. So that's just, I guess, my DNA, Taurus.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Fantastic. And talk us through Asia, because you had made significant inroads into Asia. I mean, your brand is very well known up there. Also, whenever I talk to people in hospitality and in luxury hotels, they're always asking me about you. Will you go back there? How do you feel about Asia and the future there?
Well, I think there's a huge future, but we started our first salt restaurant in Tokyo in 2005. And we expanded, as you said, to Singapore. We had 2 restaurants in Singapore, Jakarta, and we even opened in Bali at one stage there, and opened a second one. But in 2018, in June 2018, I sold my 50% share to my Japanese business partner, which was great timing for me to get out of that.
Yeah. Wow, your timing is impeccable across all levels.
Yeah.
And how do you feel about London? Because of course your career actually started there at the Waterside Inn.
Well, yeah, I've got many mates over there and kept in touch with a lot. And I would go to London and Europe their summer, our winter. But, you know, look, they're all opening up. It's been a struggle for them as well. But I think, you know, in the next 12, 18 months, we're all going to sort of get back to normal and start to live with what's gone through. And some will survive and some won't. And I think that's the same here.
And where do you go to dine out? I mean, do you ever get the chance? I know you work really hard.
Anywhere. I love simple, casual food. Casual food. I love China Dole here in Sydney. I like Mr. Wong and Sean's Panorama and Bondi Beach, icebergs, and obviously Glass and Luke's Kitchen when that opens. But just simple food. Chefs there's a lot of talented chefs in this country, and we're blessed with many in Sydney, and they respect the product and do cook simply. And I think that's a good thing.
100%. And do you have anything, any ideas, read this sort of global shortage of staff that everyone is talking to us about, whether it's in luxury hotels or restaurants, and how are we going to deal with that?
Well, it's a problem. And before this pandemic, the industry was always suffering from a shortage of chefs, waiters, and floor staff, et cetera, et cetera. We've been lucky where we've maintained and kept a lot of staff, I guess. But I think the only way we're going to get through it here in Australia is, obviously, we want to employ Australians first, and that's utmost importance. But if we can't fill those jobs, we have to look at fixing the skill shortage within Australia in the taste system and with government, which is an important thing. But also, we lost a lot of the visa holders when this pandemic happened, and we need to get them back into this country who are going to fill those jobs. And eventually that will happen. And a lot of those people will flood back and those roles will be fixed. But obviously, as I said, we want Australians in that role first.
No, 100%. And look, I just want to acknowledge and congratulate you on becoming really the ambassador for the hospitality industry for this country during this pandemic. You've been outspoken in such positive ways. You've been in the media all the time and really pushing to get the doors open, to get, as you say, support for the hospitality industry in every way. And I just think it's such a plus for all of Australia, because who doesn't love to eat out?
Yeah, exactly. Well, look, it's more of a push for the industry, because the industry has struggled, and the industry was struggling. A lot of restaurants struggled before this, as I said, not just on staff, but to make a profit. And if you don't make a profit, you can't afford to employ people, and you can't afford to expand and employ more people. So I think, we don't have much of a voice in the industry, sadly. And it just came about where, I spoke up on a few things, and it's sort of just, as in media, it just flows and follows, which is good. And my voice wasn't just for our business, but it was for the whole industry. And it seemed to flow.
Patrons, and for all of us who want to eat at your restaurants.
Yeah.
Oh, look, it's fantastic talking to you, Luke. Thank you for your time. And we ask all of our guests, and you might want to talk about what you're doing today, because you've given us a lot of insights into the future, but where to from here for you?
I think it's just a matter of getting the teams back together, which we have this week. This month in November and December is the busiest months of our year in the restaurant business, because, believe it or not, Christmas Day and Melbourne Cup Day is our busiest days in the restaurant, which is pretty incredible. So Melbourne Cup Day is the biggest race that stops the nation here in Australia. First Tuesday of every November. And it's a massive day. People come out, and we're now restrictions of ease. We can go, but we'll be back to that, seating capacity, and restaurants will be full to the brim, which is great. So I'm just sort of looking that far ahead, and then opening Luke's Kitchen in the Kimpton in January, and seeing where that takes us. I mean, who knows? I've learned not to look too forward, especially since what's happened in the last year. But what will happen will be good for everyone, I'm sure.
I'm sure. But thanks again for your time. It's just brilliant catching up with you, and can't wait to get to your restaurants ASAP.
Wonderful. Thanks for having me.
Cheers. Thanks, Luke.
See you later.
Bye now. Don't forget to subscribe here and follow us on Instagram and Facebook for regular travel updates. You can also hear our episodes on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.